All right, we are back. I am with Alli. We are going to recap the last two, Jonaed and Stephanie Short, and we are going to talk about that. So, what's been going on, Alli? How are you?
I'm well, Peter.
Yeah.
And in the world of education, what's going on is that we are a lot of people are saying the same thing using different language. That has been a theme actually for the past kind of month or more of episodes that I have been learning. And it started with this idea of AI, and
Hmm.
AI being this like term that people are using, even though it's been around, it's just now kind of taken off. And lots of people are talking about similar things, but putting it into different buckets.
Yeah.
And then in our two most recent guests with Jonaed and Stephanie, right, they're talking about these skill sets, whether it's life skills, durable skills, around education and learning. And they both were hitting on so many of the same things using different verbiage, which I find really interesting because do we have a language problem in education? That's what
Yes.
I'm wondering about.
Yeah, I think that was interesting. That was a parallel between both of them, but it's also a parallel, I think, with all a lot of our guests, right? We are talking about the same things. We're just talking about them in different ways, trying to figure out and trying to unpack. I mean, I think that's why we're talking now is this just community? Is it culture? Is it what is it? I think one of the things that struck me as very interesting was what Stephanie said pre-podcast. I don't even know if she mentioned this on the podcast, but how companies they're going to companies first. I know she mentioned that in businesses and things like that, employers, and that language is very different than academic language, and that might be part of the problem or part of the challenge, I should say. That there are two different. It takes it all. There are two different like kind of similar outcomes that we're all looking for, but there's this discombobulation there. That was my SAT word of the day. But I was thinking it goes all the way back to Nate, right? Like Nate Clayberg, who is like he's the guy who is going to pull the language of the business and pull the language of academics and try to put them together as well. I'm seeing that more and more.
I am too, and I find it interesting to hear more conversations in the educational space of people going to employers.
Mhm.
What are we not hearing as of late? People going to colleges. Is the shift here? Like colleges, more and more students are trying to go from post-secondary, sorry, not post-secondary, from secondary to jobs to get skills. I
Mhm.
mean, I still remember when we had Olivia back on the podcast in the fall of 2022, and she's doing it's in my mind, she's basically working as she's getting education with skills that she can just pass to whoever she wants to go to with the Praxis program.
Yes.
Um, and it's I wonder how this is going to push innovation in the college space, right?
Yes. Yes. And that brings me to like why I'm looking down here. For those on the I have some pictures of the 2015 conference that I went to. I was lucky enough to go to with students in Davos, Switzerland, and the Gallup people were there and they were polling. This is 2015. So this is almost, well, 8 years ago. I mean, we're looking almost a decade ago. And it came about to where 80%, around 80%, give or take a few, of colleges were saying that their graduates are ready, work ready, employer ready, corporate ready, or whatever. And about 20, I think it was like 18% of corporation CEOs were like, your kids aren't ready. And this was almost a decade ago. So I think that's where this has been boiling up for a long
Mm.
time because is academics, and you know I mean, skills, where do they cross? I mean, are they crossing? And, you know, like you said, like, yeah, what are colleges going to do about this? It's a good
Is
question.
the model potentially like, okay, you go to high school, you then it's promoted and encouraged that you go out into the world, do some work that doesn't require a degree until you have more clarity on what you want to do. And then like the education that you'd get in a college or post-secondary type program would be like really specific and not necessarily 4 years, but you know, a 6 month, a 12 month, an 18 month, a 2 year program that is like cutting out because you just went and did your generals in real life. I know I'm just like imagining something that could be different, but like if I'm a college and I want to like grab onto something else, how can I get these people who aren't maybe going the old traditional route, but they still want that education, but now they want it in a very specific, focused way, not just like so generic. I think that model is outdated in the college space. Like, oh
Right.
yeah, just take some generals, figure out what you want to do. You can do that at a job too.
Yeah, right, right. Without bankrupting, people. I think we had a speaker come in, and he was actually a previous guest on the podcast. And he Jameson Merrick, he was on my students that I did. This is even before you came on, but the summer before we teamed up here, and he's at Illinois State. Now, like, he does get some funding, so he's not paying the full price and everything like that. But he was mentioning to the kids, like, don't worry about it, figure it out. And I was just like, half of the people in the classroom are cringing. We're like, well, maybe you should worry about it because we're not all in the sense. So I think what people are, regardless, I mean, that's his lens and that's his journey. But I think one of the things that we took from it, all of us, was understand what you're investing in. And then the question is, and this has come up with some of the future guests that we're going to have in the conversations, is what really is the ROI or the return on investment of post-secondary pathways, right? In general, right? I think, one of the things that people are questioning, and I would love to pick your brain on this, and what have you heard, is, okay, the old stat with, I call it an old stat, with college educated people with a degree actually make, I don't know, 1.2 million or something like that over a lifetime. But does that take in account the debt that they run? You know what I'm saying? So, and then how long, like, what's the opportunity cost of a missed investment of possibly a kid who is working right out of school or going to a very cheaper way and bought a home and then started scaling real estate, or those types of things, investments in general. I don't know, what have you heard there?
Personally, have had family members and friends who went and got a degree in a certain field that they no longer use, and the degree cost over six figures.
Wow.
And that's a crippling amount of debt at 22. And it certainly can it can totally change the trajectory of your life if you have $1,000 payments every month, and you're not even in the field that was useful. Like, I think the chasm for getting a degree, and we've said this before on the podcast, getting a degree to go find yourself isn't as attractive now. Right? Like, I think, I don't know if we said it on the podcast or if it was like, behind the scenes conversation, but this idea that Gary V has said, like, well, I can just send my kids to the Four Seasons for a year and let them find themselves, and that would be less expensive than a 4-year college degree. And I am very much like, I think college is a great thing. I'm a college graduate. I have my master's. I have gone on beyond my master's to pursue education, and like, and my degrees definitely have served me well, and no, there's nothing wrong with that route. I just find it interesting that it's the conversations I have with young people and the conversations I have with people my age who have kids is shifting. And I do not recall a single conversation when I was at that age of anything other than going to college.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the route. Now, I did have some friends that didn't go to college, but it was kind of like they were, that's not a good idea. Versus now, I think it's way more open to like, oh, you don't want to go to college? Cool. Like, like, oh, you're going to go do an internship and then get a job and work your way up at a company or something, like be an entrepreneur. Well, way more accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of our guests talking about these skill sets, I mean, it couldn't be more relevant to the K through 12, system in trying to prepare students for that path, right? Rather than this, like, okay, we're preparing you for college, we're preparing you for all pathways, regardless.
Right. I think one of the things is well said, because you're right. I was actually thinking of the Gary Vee thing, like, the 4 seasons. And I was like, man, I wish my parents just sent me the 4 seasons. That'd be fun. But actually, you're right. I mean, I'm here saying, this with a college degree, and I do actually use some of the things in my communications major, right? I was broadcast journalism major. I learned how to edit. It's way easier now, but I'm doing it here. With the podcast we're doing, I'm producing podcasts for other people. There's a lot of different things there, how that is interacted. Should it cost as much, or can you learn it on your own now? Yeah, you can. And that's fine as well. And then, one of the things that Stephanie was talking about with the durable skills, and that understanding was, the outcome, right? What is the outcome of education? We were talking about, how what is education for? And that got me thinking, because no lie, today, when this is recorded, I showed the Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk to 2 of my classes today, because we're in business, and one of them is a career planning course. And I wanted them to see, as they're planning their career, which is kind of an outdated term, but that the students, to understand those skills that Stephanie was talking about, they have, but they just don't know how to. Well, again, we go back to language. You don't know how to use the language to say they have the skills, right? And then I think, with the portfolio things that I'm very interested in, and how students can say that they can do things, I wanted to kind of unpack that with students and have them see, he was actually, it's a great, if anybody, if you go back, it's 20 minutes. There's some comedy there. Guy, Miss Sir Ken Robinson. But he talked about the dancer who actually created Cats and some other huge, she's a multimillionaire, because they were like, yeah, this girl is not an academic student, she's a dancer. And then they put her in dance school, right? So I want that self-awareness that Jonaed was talking about for students to understand who they are at this moment, and not to back themselves into a corner. So with all of that being said, one of the things that I think is going to come out of this is, so like, what is the next step for, where education is going? And I know there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of very interesting thought processes, and the professors are being different. I mean, you're teaching at the university level, which is way different. You're not the typical professor. I'm just going to say that. So I think that's awesome. But I think you're seeing that more and more. What are they going to do? How are they going to shift? And I just wanted to end like real quick here on my thought of Sir Ken Robinson was talking about in that TED Talk about how we just move up in the body to the head. And then everything else is like, he jokes about college professors. They think the body is just something to move their beautiful minds to the next meeting. And it's such a good joke, but he's like, I was a college professor, so I kind of get this. But yeah, what are your thoughts on like where, that topic, like where does this go next?
I think it is more brain work in developing, these, call them what you want, lifelong skills, life skills, durable skills, 21st century skills, 2023 skills, future skills, all of that has to do with activating your mind and getting curious, knowing who you are, and developing that. And the only person that can do that is you. There's lots of modalities in which you can pull that out of someone, but somebody has to be like engaged in that work. And so, the educational system could really benefit from, Stephanie talked about, this model of an ecosystem, and, in having people do stuff rather than just sit and get. And I do think there are lots of schools and lots of educators who are not doing that model anymore, but it does still exist. And I found it really interesting how, she was talking about the research on brain activity in terms of when it's the most active versus,
Yeah.
in some ways, has the educational system trained
Yes.
learners' brains to shut off during what should be the most active time for them to be engaging with stuff. So it's like, how do we re-engage the mind and the brain work that is critical for developing those skills? And I think we're so far shifted into, oh, these things have to be accomplished. Students must know, these very long list of academic standards to graduate. And I think a tearing down of a lot of those, and just building students in developing how to learn whatever the topic would benefit so many people. But it's going to require, I think, when we talk about like top down or bottom up, I think it's going to require these people on the ground and local communities deciding they want to do the work and they want to advocate for change and they want to do it now. And they're not going to wait for some top-down policy to come and save them, because that is something that I know I've learned in the last 5 or so years, is how much power the local community can wield on the educational system at the local level. And it can carry up from there. So that's kind of some of my thoughts around this topic that we're exploring.
I think we're already seeing that, especially if you start to look at the stats of people pulling their kids from school who have the opportunity and the funds and whatever the means to actually do a homeschool, or maybe a smaller community parent school or something like that. We're seeing that a lot, and I think we're going to be digging into that going into summer as well. That scares people. People have, I would say scares people in education, because it's like, yeah, you do have the right. And there are people, and we'll be talking to people who are fighting against government regulation that says, you have to check these boxes because we are saying. But I have a lot of friends and colleagues across LinkedIn who are doing this differently. They're just like, yeah, no, we're not gonna silo our kid. We're gonna create that sandbox like Stephanie was talking about. When she was in quote unquote the gifted class,
Yep.
and was able to do these different things. I think the change is going to happen, I think, to a point, and this is just me looking into my crystal ball, but I also think like when a change like that happens, it's going to be eventual, but then there's going to be an abrupt, like, holy crap, we don't have any more students in our public high school right now. Why? Where are the teachers? I think that, unfortunately, and maybe even fortunately, depending on how you look at it, is going to be the catalyst of change. I think it's going to mirror the way that colleges are going to change in that 2025 cliff that's coming. The big traditional pieces, wherever they are going to thrive. But I think there's opportunity in there that schools, even in smaller public areas or more, agile areas, are going to create something different. They're going to have to. They're going to be forced to. It's interesting. I think the dominoes are starting to fall already in California with the huge teacher strike there, and the different things there too. So you have all these factors. It's exciting to be in disrupting education right now.
It is. I think these types of conversations are, I like to see them as little sparks of change, because I know I wasn't having these types of conversations. I didn't know this, how deep the well is of people doing work differently, and really trying to do it on whatever level that they can. And there's lots more disruptors out there. So for people who are in a quote unquote traditional route, or feel like there aren't other options, there really are. And the only thing that I see that AI is going to do is it's going to accelerate that. It's going to, people are going to demand changes if what they're seeing in their own educational systems in their communities is the traditional sit and get. The demand for something different, I feel like, is going to be higher. The more people like us and other people doing the work, that message gets out there that, like, this isn't how it has to be done. And that you can create change. And right, going back to Nate, in that episode, if you haven't listened to it, really, there are ways to do it. There are people in your community who want to bridge the gaps. And I really like, I think both Stephanie and Jonaed got at this with, it's like the local community wants to support the educational system because they're integral to it. And the skills that you're learning in a K through 12 system, it matters. It matters because it impacts the community moving forward. And I think that is really, really powerful. So wherever you're sitting listening to this, you can affect change, and by partnering with the right people in the right organizations.
My final thought on that is as we see these CTE directors and program pieces coming out, it is a way. And again, if you're like, this is across, like, this isn't just here in the States, right? Like, I see this in Canada, I see it in Australia and the UK, following a lot of people around the world, just understanding that, your local community, it used to be like, way back here in the States, it used to be the ones, the one room schoolhouse, right? And then, we eventually started to build mini ivory towers to get kids into major ivory towers. And, that started to cut off local community. And I think those towers are crumbling in a good way, where the local communities are. I've always thought that the local communities, their needs, their culture, the challenges, the opportunities that come along with them need to be one with the school. And then out of those, I think what we've learned over the past 2 episodes with Jonaed and Stephanie are, through that, you're going to get the experience and those durable skills that are going to allow you to become a learner again, and become curious again, and to have self-awareness, and to kind of see where you play a role in your community. So final thoughts, what do you have?
For this episode, and for many of our episodes, if we go back and really listen to the heart of the message and not get caught up on specific terms and language. Ironically, AI is a language model, the main one, ChatGPT, but that there's so much ground to do this work if we can find that common language. And it's there. It's there already. But it is finding those bridges so that people don't see it as different places, that we're trying to do similar work, but language is ever more important in all of this work.
100%. Well said. I appreciate that. And we appreciate you. Thank you guys so much, everybody, for listening. Tune in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We don't really say that, but you should probably just subscribe by now and hit that little bell, right? So again, thank you all for listening. For Alli Privitt, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We'll catch you next time on Disrupt Education. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privitt.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.